being that they are stuck in a fixed identity. What is their fixed identity? I'm stuck in my addiction. I'm stuck in my obsession. I cannot see myself as a reality higher than my own world. So this is who I am. What do you mean? Nature says, go get a job, make money, try and accumulate as much as you could, and therefore you'll be able to, I don't know, give Yerusha to your children, your grandchildren, everybody's going to be good and fine and happy. This is called the yeshus of existence. So therefore, their yeshus doesn't allow them to cultivate a deeper relationship with something called ayin, something called non-existence. They can't see that. They don't have the eyes. They don't have the vision. Therefore, they never want to forego the abundance that they receive from these ministers. This is that the Jewish people do have this power of intuition, this extreme recognition that they should and must forego the toyelis, the advantage and the benevolence that will come from the other things, and those other things' existences, and choosing godliness, is because we have souls. And our souls, and the nature of our soul is higher than nature. The nature of our soul is higher than yesh. If we have a reality in ourselves that is higher than yesh, then we are constantly and organically connected to ayin. And if we are constantly organically connected to ayin, that means that the extension of who we are in our core is able to be imposed on this world and able to see the ayin of this world. That our choice in godliness, and therefore the choice that we are choosing in godliness is in its essential intrinsic choice that supersedes intellect. At the end of the day, I'm choosing this not because God is so much more tasty than this. Again, that would still be a limitation on the relationship. That would still be that there's still some type of condition, an intellectual condition. And that would mean that what? That if I don't see love and I don't feel connected, that means that I'm disconnected. No, at the end of the day, there has to be something that's called l'mayla mitamadas. It's called soul. It's not only because the king changes, but because of my essence. And my essence is intrinsically connected to God. And this then impacts our intellect as well. The intellect is only a receptacle for the light of the soul that is such a visionary that it has the ability to see the truth. And in that truth, it's able to affect our intellects. That the intellect will also agree and affirm and acquiesce that since godliness is the truth of all life and all vitality and is everlasting, the king doesn't change. It's worthwhile to forego on my own personal existence, on the things of that attract me, and choosing godliness. Perhaps we can add. So what are we saying now? That the intelligence of the person in the medrash is only a conduit to reveal the truth of the soul. And it's not about intellect at all. It's almost like saying in a relationship, yeah? We're soulmates. At the end of the day, my husband and wife are soulmates. Happens to be that soulmate energy, yeah, to live on that idyllic level is very, very challenging. So therefore, you have to then manufacture and produce the irrationality of the soulful relationship that you have in intellect as well. But it's not to say, God forbid, that it's only based or conditioned on intelligence. This, that the heightened posture of the soul, that is so much deeper than intelligence, but it has an effect on intelligence, adds in it a greater advantage when it communicates with intellect than it is on its own. Very powerful. You hear what he said? Understanding that a soul can have a relationship with intelligence is deeper than the soul by herself. Okay? And therefore, the purpose of creation is to always fuse and synthesize reality with higher than reality. Body and soul, heaven and earth. So he's saying now that yes, of course, in our idyllic state, the soul is so much greater, is so much more profound than intelligence. But at the end of the day, the profundity of the soul, as it is woven within the calculation of intelligence, is even deeper than the soul by herself. Because what are you doing? You're giving hashpa to something, you're giving a soulful energy of godliness that is higher than seichel in seichel. Let's see. And we'll understand this by prefacing Amavur B'Sidr, what it says. There's a Maamar in the Sidr, the Alter Rebbe, the Middle Rebbe Sidr, called Avadim Hayinu L'Par B'Mitzrayim. What does it mean to be slaves? We were slaves to Paro in Egypt. Be'inin ha'ashpa nimsheches la'ivri d'tzoynei, shehi rak b'derech agav keman d'shod b'asar kasvoi. What is the material? What is the substance? Say, what is the substantiality of the energy that is given to the enemy? Is, like we said, something very insubstantial. Like we said, like a person who's feeding their enemy. Shu bedugmas melech, and he gives an example. We said two examples. Like a person who is putting somebody up for ransom. So you're just feeding them just for them to stay alive. And now he gives another mashal. Mashal lemelech, bedugmas melech. There's an example of a king. She'oise seuda umishte bishvil asarim agdoilim ve'adovim hachashuvim umoitzi al zeh mamin rav. A king makes an incredible banquet with beautiful food, amazing delicacies, for the sake of honoring his dukes and his governors and the prominent people. Uma shirayim shel seuda mikablim gam b'chusei ha'erech k'may avodim u'shvach she'achri erechayim. What happens? There's leftover from the meal, and who do you give the leftovers to? To the slaves and to the maidservants and to the second and third class citizens. And who eats the leftovers of the slaves and the maidservants and the second class citizens? Who's the leftovers? The dogs. The dogs eat the bones that the humans that they couldn't eat, they'll give it to the dogs. Surely the king had no intention when making the banquet, that I'm making the banquet in order that the dogs and the slaves and maidservants should eat also. He didn't think about them at all. He didn't say, and by the way, what is there more of? There's much more leftovers than actual food itself. Think about it. Meaning to say, there's much more to eat after the meal, right, than the meal itself. I'm saying in the actual food. This that they do get shirayim. This that they do, the dogs get the leftovers, the maidservants get the leftovers. The shirayim of the su'uda is abundant. Wow, you like me. But everybody with a brain in their skull would know that this is only tangential. This is only secondary. This is not why he made the banquet. By way of this, we can understand it in the metaphor. Yes, Hashem has to create a world, and part of creating the world and giving us free choice, He has to create klipa as well, and therefore He has to vitalize and vivify klipa. But the manner in which He vitalizes and gives energy to klipa is bederech agav, is very tangential, is very secondary. Keman deshadi basar kasvoi, like a person who throws the food over his shoulder. Kibavur shambaruch, as it says there at length. We can say the zeshem maybe shnei dugmais. This, that the Mittler Rebbe in his Sidr gives two examples of the benevolence that is given in a secondary fashion. And they're not sitting at the table of the king. The maidservants and the slaves and the dogs. And he gives two examples of those who are sitting at the king's table. Great ministers and prominent people who behitav. This is commensurate with the four levels in the nimshal. Look how deep he goes. So the Rebbe is taking an example of what the Mittler Rebbe says regarding a Maamar avadim hayinu, and he says, hold on, what a Rebbe says is exact, and the fact that he gives two examples, the slaves and the dogs, and the ministers and the prominent people, those four categories mean something. What is it? The lowest level are the dogs that surely they are not at all servants of the king. Rather, what are they there for? They're there just to suckle of the bone and get the gashmis. Oid ve'oid. And what did the dogs say? More and more. Give me more. Give me more with so little investment. There's no dog by the palace that's saying, you know what? I'm going to start behaving myself more. No. I'm going to start, I should really start serving the king. I'm not here for that. I'm literally here that whenever there's a suda, I know when. My nose smells it. So I'm eating and eating. It says in Yeshaya, klavim, dogs, are azay nefesh. They're emboldened souls. They're stubborn. Lo yadu sveya, they don't know satiation. Okay? More and more and more. Right? Kelev is kulei leiv. A dog is all heart. All heart in the sense that whatever you give them, whatever you train them, they'll do. So here the training is that when my nose smells food, I want more and more with minimal investment. The nature of a person, of a human being, is that we are structured and fashioned that our head and our hearts are on top of each other. The head is on top of the heart. A dog is, or animals in general, their structure is that the heart and the brain are equal. And this that we're saying that the hashpa, we're talking about a category of humans that are like the dogs, that are just here in this world, YOLO, yeah? You only live once. Mamish, they're literally like the dogs. And by the way, all these four categories are in us at certain points in our life. That when the Yetzer gets so deep and so suffocating, we say, what am I here for? I'm just enjoying myself. Kulei leiv, it's all about the heart. Yeah? You only live once. It's not only that the heart is now in dominance over the brain. Rather, what? You succumb totally to the addiction and you become only heart. There is no brain anymore. To the point that the brain says, I know that this is bad for me, but I can't even think of how to execute a change. And therefore, his whole entire being becomes, and his whole entire purpose becomes to fulfill my heart's desires. This is one person in the world that we're relating to like the dogs. Kulei leiv. Higher than this, these are the lowest caliber of slaves. These are the slaves and the maidservants that are after the Rechayim is the grinder, the mill. That these are people that they serve the king. They're on payroll. But they're not even on payroll. Their service is only by force. Listen to how he's saying it. I'm serving Hashem because I'm afraid of hakas hashevet. I'm afraid of the whip. I'm afraid of the rod. So therefore, I'm going to, really, what do I want? Really, I want to be like the dog. I want to fulfill my desires. But what can I do? I'm trapped, I'm slaved. And my whole being is opposing my real desire and my real pleasure. As it says, that the real position of what a slave wants to be in is freedom. Right? No slave, if you ask them, are you enjoying yourself? But if you have the option to become free, I'd much rather choose freedom. So why are you a slave? I'm forced. Need more water? Sorry.
Because they don't know how to be free.
They're stuck in their slavery. Right? But in truth, he would rather be hefker, right? The real translation, Avda, a servant, behefkera, in hefker. In being, how do you say hefker?
Freedom.
But no, that's better. When you mafkir an object,
without thinking,
the better word.
Hefker means
relinquish.
Yeah. In relinquishing him to his own self, nichale. That's like hanacha, right?
It's not consciously, though. Consciously, not consciously.
Consciously also. Nichale.
Some
It's much
slaves,
better.
They want to be slaves. They're like, I don't want to be my own. Like, I want to be under someone till you can tell me what to do.
Because it's like
It's a
they're
mindset.
taking care of them. It can't be something for nothing.
Maybe that's a lower level. But the Gemara is saying, you ask any slave, really, what do you really want? Again, maybe they're just trained to think that way. But at the end of the day, if they have liberty versus enslavement, I'd rather be free. Meaning to say that the job that I'm actually doing for the king is something that I don't really want to be doing. That's the point. Rather, I want to be kulei leiv. I want to be like a dog. I'm here in this world just to serve myself. But what can I do? I'm a slave. And why am I doing it? Because I'm afraid of the punishment. And what is their greatest pleasure and desire is the taivus of this world, is the excitement of this world. And the only reason why they're not transgressing against God is because they're afraid of punishment. Sound familiar? Where is his position? On the outside of the table of the king. Which is not the case by more prominent slaves. These are a much higher position. These are servants that want to serve the king. They understand that, yeah, you know what? Yes, I'm getting a... No, they say in contrast to the other slave, this is a good life, right? I'm by the king's table. What more can I want? If I am free,
I said it could fit more like this.
Yes. If I am very good. If I am free, I'm going to become poor and disheveled, and I'm not going to get what I want. This is geschmack. So I'm at the king's table. Even though their primary their primary service is because of Kabbalah's oil, because of the acceptance of the yoke. As we know the difference between a son and a slave. The reason why a son performs the will of his father is because of love. But in contrast to a slave, he fulfills the will of the master because of Kabbalah's soul, because of the yoke. Nevertheless, but 1 second, I want the yoke. I want the yoke because I know this is a better life than just going after my own taivas. And that's what you're talking about, yeah? I'd rather be in the structure of prison and jail and enslavement, but at the end of the day, this is a good life. I'm speaking about a good, healthy relationship between master and servant, not abusive. All right? I'm not speaking about like American slavery. If you look, really in Hebrew, in English, we should say an indentured servant. Right? When Torah speaks about a slave, it's speaking about a slave that gives himself up because he mamish has nothing else. And as it says, somebody who acquires a slave really acquires for himself a master. Because you have to give him the highest portion. So he's like, you know what? This is a good life. But I'm doing it because I love my master. It's beautiful. Not like the other ones. That they desire to accept upon themselves the yoke of the king. And therefore they get to eat at the king's table. Yes, they're slaves, but they're slaves in understanding the goodness of what their master is giving them. Higher than them are the ministers. They know the inner workings of how the kingdom works. And therefore, a lot of things, the king's like, hey, is this a good thing that I should do? These are the advisors. And the advisors know a little bit of what the king's likings are. So they give him options, and he gives them options. And there's a beautiful relationship. They also know how amazing and powerful the king is. And therefore, they have love towards the king. These prominent advisors love the king because they see his awesomeness, and therefore they really this. I would rather do this than anything else. In the ministers themselves, in the advisors themselves, there are many levels. And in general, you could divide them into two. We have regular advisors and then the scholars. These three categories that are found by the king's table. Who do we have? Avadim chashuvim, prominent servants. Sarim, advisors, v'sarim g'dolim, and scholarly advisors. This relates to the three categories in the Medrash. Why does the Medrash specify three? Duchsin, v'ifruchin, v'istartulutin. We translated them as dukes and governors and generals. This is the entourage of the king. They're always found next to the king. As the Medrash says, they were with him. They're his entourage. They're with him. These are reflective of the three categories that we just said in the mashal of the prominent servants, the advisors, and the profound advisors. Based on this, we can say, what is the intention in the Medrash? Simply speaking, when we say dukes, who are these dukes? These are the 70 nations of Klipas Noiga. Like it says above in the other Maamarim. Nevertheless, yes, these are the 70 nations of Klipas Noiga, the luminescent shell. Nevertheless, they're hayu imoy. They're with him. They're with the king. They're still part of his entourage. Is to hint to us that here we are speaking. We're not speaking about the 70 nations as they are detached and think of themselves as their own prominent dominion. That they are some entity in and of themselves, like a Achashverosh or a Haman or whatever. They're not like the lower class slaves that have no interest in serving the king. In which what? They are outside of the king's table. But rather we're referring to what is the source of the 70 nations of the world? The malachim, the angels. It says that the 70 nations of the world's spiritual zodiac and energy come from the 70, I don't know if it's angels or energies that are precipitating down into the 70 nations of the world. And when they are in that strata, they are batal elikus, they're nullified to godliness. Now here we're speaking about even deeper. Higher than the hashpa of the ayin sarim, higher than the hashpa of the malachim, who are the ones who precipitate the hashpa to these 70 nations, are called spheros. What are spheros? At the end of the day, spheros can also be avodah zara. They can also be not atzmos. The spheros are still something that you would say, oh, Hashem is chesed, Hashem is gvura. Is Hashem chesed or gvura? Is Hashem chazdan or a gibor? At the end of the day, yes, even though we say Natzilus, that Iyu v'chayu yichad, he and his life forces are one. He and his spheres are one. Shem tamid melech, they're connected to him constantly. Now we understand even greater the profound intuition and wisdom of the one who says, I will choose the king. We're not speaking about a person who it's clear and obvious that avodah zara, serving the sun, moon, and stars, is actually a challenge for me. And we're not even speaking about a person who is serving Hashem just for the reward. But we're speaking about a person who even knows the various avenues and paths of the spiritual world. That he's tuned into the spheres. He's tuned into the malachim. You're speaking about a guy who's knows Kabbalah, who knows mamish the deepest depths of the secrets of the world. By him, maybe he could say, you know what Hashem is? He's Adnai. He's Elikim, he's Yudke, he's Ekya, he's Yudke Vavke, right? A person then becomes overwhelmed or connected to things that are also not Atzmos of Hashem. They're the spheres of Hashem. They're still just Imoy. They're still with him. It's not Anna Nasiv Malka. You hear the difference? The noise of in addition, again, the Rebbe is going into a deeper description of this wise person. The wisdom of this wise person in the first part seems more simplistic. Now he's speaking about that's so deep. It's not only he doesn't want to receive the benevolence like the dogs, and he doesn't want to receive the ashpa like the lower caliber servants that are on the outside of the king's table. Even though they receive much more abundantly and much more unconditionally. And he wants to be by the king's table. But he wants to be by the king's table, why? Because it's chashuv? Because it's the king's table? Because it's chashuv to be a Jew? Rather, you're talking about a person, he doesn't even want the dukes and the governors and the treasure and whatever. What are these things? We're not talking about klipa anymore. We're talking even in Kedusha. Even in Kedusha, a person can say, I know the Malachim and the Sfiris Datzilus and the Ma'ila Yoser. A person can be so scholarly in the Kabbalistic realm that Chas v'Sholem, you may create a duality even in Kabbalah, even in the higher worlds. So therefore, notwithstanding his profound intelligence in the spiritual realms, Ana Nasiv Malka, I still choose the king. I choose the king, and I know, and I never will get confused, that the reality of the Sfiris and the Malachim are something that is actually separate from Hashem's essence. Like the famous teaching of the Baal Shem Tov al Pasuk, it says, Tfila le'ani. This is beautiful. Tfila le'ani ki yateif v'lifnei havaya yishpech sichoy. It says in Tehillim, like the prayer of a poor person, ki yatoif, that he garbs himself, v'lifnei havaya, and before Hashem yishpech sichoy, he spills, he profuses his words. She'eino mevakesh shum davar u'tfilasei, he shelifnei havaya yishpech sichoy. What does it say? The poor person does not get distracted by when a poor person comes to the king's palace and invited to the king's palace. He's not, as we say in Yiddish, he's not a feinschmecker. That he knows the art. Oh, you know the art room of the king? Oh my gosh. He's not into the delicacies. He's not an Epicurean, that he's just into the king's food. Wow, did you ever see the king's meal? All of the sophisticated people that are connecting to the king, that are now invited to the king's palace, they have an agenda outside of the atzmos of the king, outside of the essence of the king. Because of their sophistication, because of their profundity. Whereas the Baal Shem Tov says, Tfila le'ani, a tefillah la'ani is able to go lifnei havaya. The poor person's prayer is able to transcend and supersede Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei is the Sfiris, Yud Kei Vav Kei is the Oilamas, Yud Kei Vav Kei is the Malachim. The tefillah la'ani, becoming a simple person, a humble person, is able to now circumvent the system of reality and enter into the essence of God. And with this you need tremendous wisdom. The example of a king of flesh and blood. In order to enter into his inner chamber, to see the king and to find the king, you have to go through a lot of chambers. In each one there's tremendous worth, tremendous treasure. So you'll say, wow, you imagine I have a full glimpse of the king's palace. This is where he keeps his money. You want to see the most beautiful gem, the most beautiful ruby, the most beautiful diamond? This is here. I'm not so into that. I don't know about it. But I know about food. I know about art. I know about music. Wow, this is mamish a violin from 1,000 years. Imagine. So it's hoyin yakar. Everything has tremendous value to a person that is knowledgeable, that is scholarly. Look at this, that's so funny. He says, and you have these Epicureans that when they see these valuable things that they value so much in the exterior chambers, not the inner chamber, of course, they get so much pleasure from this. With such awesome pleasure, what happens? They forget why they're invited. So they get stuck in the art, and they get stuck in the food, and they get stuck in the money. But there are those who don't get stuck in the outer chambers. They go into the inner chamber. But even the inner chamber is still superficial relative to who the king's essence is. It's specifically a wise person. But the wisdom doesn't come with your money. The wisdom may come with your simplicity. The Rebbe says in Yiddish, he doesn't care for.